As we told you earlier this hour, 7 Democratic presidential candidates are set to take the debate stage in Los Angeles tonight. Ahead of yesterday's impeachment vote, our Ed O'Keefe spoke to Democratic voters to get their opinions. Take a listen.
He's held accountable. He's not above the Constitution.
I see this whole thing as a distraction for the president to get things done on the world stage.
I do think he had it coming, but I don't think it was politically a smart move.
Completely 100% bogus. He will be vindicated.
So Ed is joining us now from Marina del Rey to talk all about tonight's debate. So, of course, Ed, you were talking to those voters about impeachment. In the previous debates, when I asked you about whether or not impeachment was an issue, and particularly as you've been following the Democratic candidates around, you pointed out that voters were really not that interested in impeachment. There are other things like the economy, health care, stuff that really affects their day-to-day life. But I wonder now if that opinion has changed now that the president actually has been impeached.
Well, too soon to say, at least from a polling perspective, potentially. And in some ways, part of this is beyond, the realm of debate. The only question now is, will there be a trial and in what form? And perhaps you asked that question tonight of the senators who are set to sit as jurors. But otherwise, yes, as we've talked about for the last several months over the course of this impeachment debate, voters out here in the rest of America would prefer to hear them talk about health care, climate change, the economy, gun control, issues like that. And here in California, there's a big push to have them talk about issues more important to this, the nation's largest state, and one that's getting far more attention this election cycle because it's holding its primary on Super Tuesday.
So would you say that health care would be perhaps the top issue?
Certainly here in California and across the country, yes, it remains the top issue of concern, not only health care, but how to pay for health care. And whether you switch to some kind of Medicare for all government-run plan or just bolster the Affordable Care Act. Obviously, a more urgent concern now, given that there was a court ruling yesterday from an appeals court that said that the individual mandate itself, the law requiring people to actually have health care, is unconstitutional. So likely now this could become a more urgent line of questioning tonight as well.
Yeah. So I know, the challenges of some of the earlier debates is there were just so many candidates on the stage that it was really difficult for any of them to make that much of an impact unless they had sort of a witty zinger. But, in terms of explaining their policy, you didn't really get a lot of that. Now we only have 7 people on the stage. How is that going to change the dynamic?
Certainly gives them more airtime, and not only is that a good thing potentially for them, but it also could be risky because it might mean that they are asked to drill down a little more specifically on some of these issues that maybe they're not as well versed in. But it also would and should allow for us to get a better sense of the contrast between some of these candidates. I think the one to watch tonight is Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who has continued to maintain a pretty good polling position in Iowa and New Hampshire, especially, maybe not nationwide, but national polls don't matter. It's looking at those early state polls. Buttigieg now creeping up while Elizabeth Warren has kind of stagnated or dropped a little bit. And so don't be surprised if you see some kind of exchange between them tonight, because a lot of these surveys have found that while they may be the first choice of some voters, they are the second choice of those same voters. There might be a Warren-Buttigieg voter out there or a Buttigieg-Warren voter out there. And so both of them will be looking to win back those voters, especially urgently now in Iowa and New Hampshire.
This will be the first debate with no Black or Latino candidates on the stage. Andrew Yang is the only minority on the stage. How are voters and candidates responding to that?
Well, remember, there's been some debate over this in the last few weeks about whether the DNC may have inadvertently caused the historic diversity of this field to not be reflected on stage tonight. And there's been a push over the weekend, a letter signed by 9 of the candidates, the 7 on stage, plus Senator Cory Booker and Julian Castro, who didn't make the cut, calling on the DNC to reconsider and change the rules going into January, February, March debates, saying you've got to come up with a way that better reflects the diversity of this field and allows the voters to hear from more candidates as they make their decision. They make a fair point. Nobody's cast a vote yet. We're still about 45 days or so away from anyone doing so. Why would you start to limit the choices for voters who are only now potentially tuning in? The flip side of that is we're only a few days from Christmas. Most Americans are going to be running around probably doing last-minute preparations for the holidays. Probably don't want to hear more from politics after this week of impeachment, let's be frank. So the audience might actually be smaller tonight and may not be a great chance for these folks to even make a dent anywhere. So we'll see. The DNC says essentially this kind of rule, the polling and fundraising threshold requirements that have been in place, is likely to continue for January. Where the rules may start to change is in February and March. And it's likely to be a set of rules that actually limits things even more to those that perhaps are actually starting to win and pick up delegates.
Okay, so I want to ask you about someone who actually didn't make the debate stage, but she's still running, Tulsi Gabbard. Yesterday, during the impeachment vote, she voted present. I'm wondering about the strategy. I mean, it certainly has people talking about her now, whereas perhaps they weren't before. But what do you think the strategy was for doing that?
Well, that's part of it. We are talking about her. Look, the Hawaii Congresswoman who continues to run a campaign that's sort of under the radar in most places, but is actually doing decently in New Hampshire in that she's polling at like a high single digit right now, which, you know, is nothing to sneeze at because in a volatile field you actually could potentially see a bit of a bounce. She has focused especially on New Hampshire, where for whatever reason she actually has found a lot of interest and support. Her argument is, look, I supported the impeachment inquiry because the president has done things that are wrong, but I didn't want this to become a partisan exercise. She said in a statement last night, it has become a partisan exercise, therefore she wanted to stand in the center and essentially vote present. I'll be very curious today, especially to see what her fellow Democratic opponents make of this and whether they think that this is something that's disqualifying or would disqualify her from the Democratic race. The threat or the concern, because this has been talked about, is that she might just drop out of the Democratic race and drop out of the Democratic Party and try to mount some kind of independent presidential bid. She insists she's not doing that. People close to her say that she has other ambitions beyond, you know, being a spoiler for the Democratic Party. But when you cast a vote like that, you got to wonder, what is she really thinking and what is this designed to do? Not entirely clear.
Yeah, that's so true. Ed O'Keefe, thank you so much.
Take care.